Okay, we can pick it up in the next part to this video lecture, and I'll pick it up right at the start of Chapter 2, Human Communication Processes in the Small Group Context. This scenario taken from the text, I'm not going to read this. It's up to you whether you want to read the chapters before or after you see this lecture. In any case, read through that at some point. And I don't mean to start out on the wrong foot, but this first example is what can go wrong with groups right from the beginning. A lot can go wrong with groups. Having said that, a lot can go right with groups as well. So this is just kind of illustrating some of the challenges that arise from group work and somebody not showing up when they're supposed to. And this is typical, and it's relevant to this class and the project you're going to be doing, because you're going to need to meet some way. You're not going to be meeting in person. We know that. That's not going to happen. So you're going to be meeting through mediated means, virtually, and in some ways that's going to add more challenges. But again, we're all adults in this class, and we're going to make it work. And if the assumption is, for me as the teacher, is that you guys will work out whatever conflicts that you have. It's just good practice. It's just going to be part of your work life. You have to figure things out so you can move ahead. And if there is a particularly bad situation, then you could talk to me, and I can mediate and figure something out. So don't worry about that. But that's what this illustrates. Groups can start off on the wrong foot. So this example is a service learning project, and it has to do with animal overpopulation, which is a serious problem. I think we can safely say, though, that the problem that you're going to be dealing with for this project is bigger and probably even more difficult. So I don't want to scare anybody away. I'm going to be very reasonable in assessing. I just want to see how you work as a group and what you can put together, basically. That's the whole learning experience to this. You're going to be providing a solution to a problem. So animal overpopulation is definitely a problem. So in this particular student example, for their class, they had to figure out how to, or provide some solutions to that problem. They bonded first, and then there were issues, and that can come in any sequence. There's going to be conflict and issues in group work, guys. It just happens. And that's why when you find your zone, and when you find what's called synergy in the group, and you do amazing things, that's what makes it all worthwhile. So hopefully that's a long-term goal in this class, that you see the power of groups and see that groups can do more and better than individuals. Verbal sparring, of course, that's a part of it. And in this particular example, even though there was an absentee, the group decided to move forward, which is the right thing to do. You can't let one or two people stop the progress of a group. You need to move ahead. You don't want to cut that person out, but you need to keep moving. If you stop every time a person doesn't show up or doesn't respond, you'll never get anything done. Why is this? People have different personalities, so it operates on a psychological level. We're similar in some ways. You're all college students, similar in age, maybe similar, where you grew up, but you're different people. Okay, and again, that's one of the things that makes group work difficult. And sociology fits in there too. You come from different backgrounds. Some of the norms might be different. Status level might be different. Status is something we'll talk more about in groups. And the underlined bit I have here, how we communicate determines the nature of the group. Communication makes the group, okay? And it's how we forge, maintain, and coordinate the group. So it operates at the beginning. There's a maintenance aspect to it. And in this particular group that you're going to be working in for the project, you're going to want to coordinate too. So it's not the kind of group where it's a group of good friends and trying to decide what movie to go to or what restaurant to get something to eat at. You're trying to accomplish a task, and so you're going to want to have some kind of structure and coordination in the group. Communication is the lifeblood that flows through the veins of the group. Communication is not just a tool that group members use. Groups are best regarded as a phenomenon that emerges from communication. So the author of this text makes very clear, without communication, there's no group. Okay, communication is what makes the group. Use a little metaphor, analogy here. Basketball's an apt metaphor for this project that you're going to be working on. Even if we get one more person to join the class and we're up to 6, that person can come off the bench, so that can be the 6th person, so to speak. Right now we have 5 people in the class, 5 students, I should say. Hopefully it'll stay like that. And that is the number of players who are on the basketball court. They all have positions, and their roles differ. Not all roles are the same between the forward and the center and the guards, etc. Leadership is an important element, of course. If we're just talking basketball, think back to the winningest teams. They usually have a couple people who have, and I'm talking about men's and women's basketball here, that really kind of stood above everybody and kind of led the group. And by stood above, I'm not saying, was a better person. They just happen to have certain leadership qualities. And leadership qualities can also, not necessarily scoring and blocking shots and everything, but just being a leader. There's a lot of ways you can be a leader. On the court, you need to solve problems constantly, right? With the defense, you need to make decisions on the fly. And again, you need to deal with conflict on the basketball court, just as you will in the small group. So if you get into a disagreements are fine. First of all, we're going to have different opinions, and we should disagree. Agreeing on everything is not good. We'll talk more about that later. But when you disagree, and even if it gets a little heated and turns into more of a conflict, you're going to want to work through it. And when you do, you'll be stronger for it. So on the basketball court, you see players on the same team arguing all the time, and it gets pretty bad sometimes, but if they can overcome that conflict, they'll be better for it in the long run. This is just a little question. We don't need to talk too much more about sport. I know some of you have played football. There's more players on the field than basketball. What does that mean? That means that it's just a more complicated, complex situation. So the more people that you have in a group, the more complex the situation is. There's pluses and minuses to that. Just a little quick look at the paper that you're going to be doing. More details on that, and I'll put together a video and also talk to you directly about this paper to clarify anything, but you're going to be talking, and this is going to be within small groups and organizations. You have a choice to talk about roles, leadership, or conflict, or just do all three within a certain context in your life. Okay, so more details on that. Roles and leadership we're going to cover directly in this class. Conflict, we're not going over the chapter just because the summer class we're not really going to have the time for it. It'll come up. We're going to definitely talk about conflict, but we're not going to actually go over that specific chapter. What is small group communication? That's what part of the name of this course is, small group communication. It's the study of interaction among members. Early research in this regard dealt a lot with decision making and what's called group climate. And if you took the intro class, you remember we talked about climates, communication climates. So with respect to a group, newer research in this way has talked more about creativity, structure, and leadership. I underline structure because that's a really interesting way to look at groups, and groups need to be structured. Best to have some structure. There can be too much structure. Yes, it can be too rigid, but if there isn't any, that's a problem. We'll talk more about technology with respect to small groups, and outcomes are important. What are outcomes? With respect to the project you're going to be doing, the outcome is the project, the deliverable, the presentation that you're going to be giving at the end of the term. That's just going to put together your findings for the project. Okay, so you all want a grade as an outcome too. You all want a good grade. I know how students are, and so you're going to want to make sure that that project is well done. Small groups versus dyads and organizations. It's a matter of scale. A dyad is 2. Small group is 3 to 15. That's the range we're going to go with. So a dyad's not a small group. 2 people, interpersonal communication does not constitute a small group. And then beyond 15 is really kind of a large group, and then an organization, etc. Organizations can go from, say, there's some shading into, you can have an organization that's only 10 people, but you can have an organization that's several hundred thousand too. So you can say that the company AT&T is an organization, but AT&T has thousands of smaller organizations within it as well. And just the last slide for this presentation. There's more to it than verbal communication. Listening is important, and nonverbals are important in small group communication. The challenge is for us is we're not in person, which is really going to greatly affect nonverbal communication because we're doing this in a mediated fashion. And the first step to dealing with that is just realizing it, acknowledging it, that we're working in a mediated setting, and there's ways to make up for it, and more on that later. So that concludes this next video lecture.